Americans who are against the Biden student loan forgiveness. Why? I only disagree with it because it doesn't address the fundamental problem with these loans, which is the predatory interest rates that make them damn near impossible to pay off. The government should be regulating those rates so students aren't being gouged and can actually pay the loans off with reasonable interest. Edit. Just want to clarify, in pro-loan relief, I just wish more was being done to address the core issue with these loans. But I would rather the government do something instead of continuing to do nothing. It also doesn't address college costs. The cost of higher education has far outpaced inflation for decades. This is especially problematic for public universities. Tie cost increases to inflation. It's kind of an endless cycle. If the government is going to fully back student loans, then universities have no incentive to lower costs. They know kids will have to take out loans to pay, and that amount will always be yoked. When the US government basically took over the student loan system back in the late 90s. The colleges just saw the opportunity to start jacking the costs of tuition, etc. Just take a look how much the UC Berkeley system has in its coffers. Was going to comment exactly this. Federally backed student loans? Why shouldn't we perpetually increase the costs of tuition, fees, textbooks, etc.? Dirtbags, the lot of them. It's not that complicated. The government had good intentions but ended up creating a monster. Again. I'm against it as a solution, because schools will still charge $100 kier and lenders will still keep making ridiculous loans. Yep. The debt is a symptom. The problem is the extremely large expense that is scaled far more than the rate of inflation. Fix the problem, not the symptom. I don't disagree with it per se, but without setting up systems to keep school costs in check, we will get this crisis to reoccur every few years as college costs keep skyrocketing. Before federal student loans were guaranteed, college was nowhere near this expensive. Yes, very much a treatment of the symptom, not the cause. Good point. Edit. Fuyu, and so I don't have to respond to a ton of people, I was simply agreeing with the fact that it isn't treating the underlying issue. I'm absolutely in favor of loan forgiveness, however. Sounds familiar. Is it the medical metaphor? HRMMM, oh yes, healthcare system. If only there would be a solution. You know something another country is already doing. Like Germany, which happens to have free healthcare and free higher education. If only people could see the overall altruistic benefit in paying your taxes. Fair share of taxes. Everyone should pay taxes so everyone has access to healthcare and education and proper infrastructure. Poor and extremely wealthy alike. Loan forgiveness doesn't make sense unless you also stop giving out the loans. Universities were able to increase their tuitions so much because everyone was getting guaranteed student loans. And now you're putting down precedent that the loans can be forgiven. Does that sound wise to you? I think cutting the interest to 1% makes more sense. 1. It doesn't fix the problem, which is the absurd cost. Forgiving debt probably makes it much worse as future students are going to think they too will eventually get their loans forgiven, making them willing to borrow spend even more. 2. The largest benefits go to people solidly in or on their way to being among the higher earners in our country. 3. It will exacerbate resentment of the less well-educated, who already feel they get a raw deal, further polarizing our society. I think these issues could be addressed with more thoughtful programs. It'd forgive interest only, and make future loans interest-free. But it also cap costs at the institution level, not just borrowing limits or costs paid by students, but an all-in cap that includes all tax dollars and tuition, and it'd place some default risk back on the institutions. It'd make tuition and student loan payments tax-deductible and require institutions to use their endowments to reduce costs further. It'd expand the entire program to vocational education. If the actual student loan program were reevaluated, loan forgiveness wouldn't be an issue. I'm fine with the interest being forgiven, or a good portion of it. But you weren't forced to take out the loans, that was a choice. You are responsible for your choices and debts, not the taxpayer. The real issue is let's make education more affordable. Wasn't this asked like 2 days ago? 1. It doesn't solve the core problems with the education system being overly expensive for what it provides. 2. The burden of paying just gets passed on to the taxpayer, which is the middle class, because the rich can just use their money to avoid paying much of their taxes. Make the banks pay for charging excess interest or the schools pay for giving out BS degrees that no one will hire. 3. It is inflationary in nature. Think of what you'll do when your loan is forgiven with the new money. Now multiply it by the millions more who will be doing that same thing. You really think you'll be able to get that new car or down payment on a house when every other person with their newly forgiven loans are doing the same thing? 4. It is unfair for the people who paid their own way through school or already paid their loans. I'm not going to get a refund for working part-time through school to pay for my education when I could have partied instead. Yet, the inflation and taxes will affect me. Ultimately, I think it's just a bad policy. It preys on voters thinking that this will just solve all of their problems when it really won't. I'm against it because the government are speaking out of both sides of their mouth. If student debt was so bad that it should be forgiven, then why are the same loans being made to new students now? I'd have some capacity for the idea if it was done after the government putting an end to any new student loans, but that's not the case. At the end of the day, the student promised to pay the debt back, so they should do so. I know this is not a popular view, but it's quite an important moral in my view. That's not to mention that the taxpayer is going to be picking up the tab for this anyway, which is hardly a good idea when we struggle as a nation, financially, as it is. Because it won't change the for-more-profit mindset of the college system, at all, and will maybe even make it worse in the very near future. Yes, it'll help tons of people now, but next week? Next year? Problem not solved. It's treating a symptom and sets an enormously bad precedent. I had someone tell me recently that they had their kid take out loans instead of using the money they set aside because of the chance of forgiveness. Solve the college cost problem first by reforming the loan system that encourages college bloat. From admin to amenities. Limit loans to X for an undergrad degree. You want to go to Stanford, pay up or get scholarships. Figure out how to subsidize the needy with a different and separate system. Those folks need as much help with living expenses as they do with college expenses. Reddit loves to compare college cost with Europe but doesn't compare the relative luxury of our experience. And they certainly don't have the ridiculous admin bloat. A college professor acquaintance of mine described the absolute flood of email from admin when COVID hit as a huge red flag of all the useless roles that exist in the system as these people tried to justify their existence. They are an unnecessary part of the cost of a college degree. Why should my taxes pay the principal for a bunch of loans people couldn't pay off? They took on the responsibility, not me. Now, if the relief went towards interest, maybe I would change my tune. But it doesn't. I don't mind helping, if those who I help are trying to help themselves. Honestly, this is Biden buying votes. College graduates on average earn much more over the course of a lifetime than high school graduates. Why should high school graduate taxpayers subsidize those who will be better off than they are? Because it doesn't address the primary issue that it claims to address, and there are way better options to address said issue. It's primarily a political bluff to win over young and emotional voters by insinuating there's a $10,000 check waiting for them if they vote Democrat in the next election. If you want economic relief, tax the rich more, tax corporations fairly, and regulate the healthcare industry to reduce prices. Any one of these three options have a higher ROI for the average student, let alone average American. It's kinda weird to forgive someone for a thing like this. They didn't have to take the loan, why forgive them? The government being a guarantor of student loans means that this debt falls on the taxpayer. The move to privatize education through loans is essentially another tax dodge of the baby boomers that own a large portion of the wealth in this country and now as a group represent an investor class who vote against anything that benefits those who work. We need government out of loans and watch college prices drop immediately. People shouldn't pay off debt that isn't theirs. Nothing is being forgiven, it is just being reassigned for others to pay. 1. It transfers the cost from the people who took out the loans to taxpayers, who didn't T2. It creates an expectation that this will occur for every new group of students. 3. It disincentivizes schools to reduce costs. A better option would have been to require schools to provide refunds, and to penalize schools for increasing costs. An even better solution would be to allow students to discharge the debt through bankruptcy. That would end the whole student loan fiasco once and for all. Edit, added second solution. Because I decided which university to attend and how much I worked during, and where because of their tuition reimbursement, based solely off cost of attendance. I know many people who took out loans for housing living expenses and lived it up in college not giving a F. Some now have fancier university names in their degrees and if their debt is wiped out, they don't have to be held accountable for the consequences of their decisions. First of all, the executive branch of the government shouldn't have this power. It should be handled by the legislature. My other complaint is that it is a slap in the face to those that exchanged military service for college tuition. It weakens their commitment and service. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, Anytime the government showers money on something, it gets more expensive. And that's what will happen to college tuition, which is already a huge problem.